Hello and welcome to the daily newspaper analysis. Today we shall be discussing the newspaper of the 16th of January 2018. So coming to the first article, enabling a form of super surveillance. This is an editorial on the Aadhaar project. It delves into several criticisms regarding the Aadhaar project. The opinion is that the Aadhaar project falls short of limiting biometrics collection to voluntary choice and in guaranteeing data protection. Now, the context of this article is that the Aadhaar Act 2016 is being examined by the Supreme Court. The proceedings will start from the 17th of January when a 5-judge constitutional bench is going to examine this issue. Also, the recent expose by the Tribune on the Aadhaar issue regarding data leaks and data breaches by the UIDAI. So that is the context of this particular editorial. Now, several issues that have been analyzed are, first and foremost, Aadhaar is based upon an executive order. Now, the entire project Aadhaar came into existence in the year 2009 when the UIDAI was formed to implement the Aadhaar project. However, there is a severe criticism against this project that this was not done through a parliamentary backing. There was no legal backing to this, and it was merely an executive order. Often this is given as a stark example of executive activism. Because Aadhaar was an important issue, it involved taking personal biometric information of the citizen. So it was a controversial one, and debates on this were warranted, which did not happen. So that is the first issue that has been analyzed in this editorial. Now, the second issue is stemming from the first itself, that because Aadhaar does not have a parliamentary backing, it lacks adequate safeguards. This has been analyzed by the author in the editorial. Another thing that has been analyzed is the coercive element in Aadhaar. Now, if a citizen is unwilling to get enrolled into Aadhaar, he will be subject to discrimination by the state because he shall not be able to avail various state services for which Aadhaar has become mandatory. Time and again it has been quoted even by the Supreme Court that Aadhaar shouldn't be a coercive act, it should be a voluntary choice, but this is not something that has been implemented in practice because the government is issuing several notifications to make Aadhaar a primary requisite to get government services. So that is one issue that has been analyzed in this editorial. Another thing is that related to the Aadhaar Bill 2016 being treated as a money bill. Now, in the backdrop of this entire controversy that Aadhaar does not have a legal backing, it has not been discussed in the parliament, the government came up with the Aadhaar Bill 2016. The full form was the Aadhaar Targeted Delivery of Financial and Other Subsidies, Benefits and Services Bill 2016. But a major controversy arose when the Speaker sanctioned the Aadhaar bill as a money bill. This resulted in the fact that the Rajya Sabha's affirmation for this bill to become an act was not required. And this being especially important because the Lok Sabha has a majority of the government. So in this scenario, again the accusation that adequate debates and deliberations on the entire Aadhaar Act have not happened in the parliament stands right even today. So that is one issue. Another thing is the issue of voluntary choice. As I mentioned before, that Aadhaar was envisaged as a voluntary choice. Also, even the Aadhaar Act of 2016 calls for Aadhaar being a voluntary choice. But the implementation and practice in reality is away from this, as Aadhaar is being made as a compulsion to attain government services. So this is an issue that the editorial highlights again. Now, there are 4 core interests which the editorial brings about. The first of these is that can state compel a person to part with his biometric information without the person's informed consent? This is a moral and ethical question. Another thing is that of surveillance. Now, because Aadhaar is being mandated in so many different fields, for example, the bank accounts need to be linked with Aadhaar, the mobile numbers need to be linked with Aadhaar. In such a scenario, the government becomes a repository of something called a big data of the citizens. And this will amount to giving government indirect powers of surveillance on the citizens, which is a cause of concern in a free country and a free democracy as India. This is something that is being highlighted by various experts. This can be misused by the government. So that is another cause of concern. Also, the issue of exclusions exists in Aadhaar. Now, the primary aim of Aadhaar has been to eliminate exclusions in delivery of public services. However, in some cases, Aadhaar itself can lead to exclusions. Now, two examples have been given here. First is that of the elderly, and the second is that of manual laborers. Now, because in the case of the elderly and the manual laborers, the biometric of the fingerprint is bound to change with time, and in fact, it changes rapidly. There have been cases reported where these two vulnerable groups were not given their services because their Aadhaar biometrics did not match their Aadhaar number. So this is an important issue that has been raised in the editorial, and no redressal to this problem is there even in the Aadhaar Act. So that is one analysis that has been drawn. Another issue is that of protection of data. Now, because Aadhaar involves collecting so much of details about every single citizen, so the data is very, very crucial, and this data needs adequate protections, which the Aadhaar is lacking. This was recently brought to the fore even by the expose, the sting operation conducted by the Tribune, where data was easily obtained from the UIDAI fora, as well as the fact that adequate responsibility has not been taken by the UIDAI in this regard. So that is one important issue that has been highlighted. Another aspect relating to the Aadhaar issue is the breach of rights. Now, under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution, all citizens of India have a fundamental right to life and liberty. And in this right to liberty is also the right to bodily integrity. In such a scenario, every citizen has a right to not divulge his biometrics to any fora. In such a scenario, the government is coercing the citizens to share their biometrics, and that too without their informed consent. So this amounts to a breach of their fundamental right. This is one aspect. Another aspect is that recently in the Puttaswamy judgment, the Supreme Court has called for making the right to privacy as a fundamental right. In that scenario too, the government does not have the authority to take personal information from the citizens without their consent, and also places an obligation on the government to protect that particular piece of information which they have collected. So both these concerns become important under the right to privacy also. So this issue of breach of rights in the Aadhaar project is important, and which the Supreme Court will be delving into. Another thing is, again, a moral and ethical question is that can the government ask for preconditions to do its job? Now, you have to understand that in a democracy, the citizen is the king, and the government is not superior to the citizens, rather it is subordinate. It is government service rather than government authority. So, now the government, for fulfilling its job, that is of public service, is setting preconditions that it requires adequate data and it needs to acquire biometric details of the citizen. So can this be justified in a modern country and a modern sovereign democratic country like India is a moral and ethical question which is being raised by several experts. So that is the importance of this question. Another thing is that of a fear that this will result in a police state. Now you have to understand that first and foremost, the government has acquired powers of surveillance. Also, this entire argument given by the government that it needs details of all the citizens is akin to treating all citizens as criminals, as the government is going to can monitor all the citizens, and the government has time and again reiterated that such kind of data with the government will help the government in ensuring the internal security of the country. So all of these powers, these extra powers that the government is subsuming through the Aadhaar project, can result in a situation where the state can become a police state, and this is something that is one of the biggest threats to democracy in India. So this is a major concern that is being raised by several experts. Another issue is that of conflicting dual responsibility with the UIDAI. Now the issue here is that the UIDAI is both the custodian as well as the regulator of the Aadhaar database. So this is causing a conflict of interest. Also, any breach of data from the UIDAI will be known to the UIDAI only. For example, if this data, this expose by the Tribune was not brought to the fore, this breach of data would have been known to the UIDAI itself only because it is the regulator. Also, there is no fora for recourse to an effective remedy is another issue related to this entire issue. So definitely this act in itself is not a complete act. It does require some changes, more so in the interest of the citizens and ensuring adequate checks on the government. So this is what the editorial has analyzed in complete. Now the article is important first and foremost directly under the analysis on Aadhaar. Another thing where it becomes important is from the ethical point of view, as I raised two moral questions here. Some moral aspects are important in this particular editorial, so that is important again. With this, we'll discuss the second article. The article is a new weapon in the carbon fight. The opinion is that the ability of soils to sequester carbon as a win-win strategy must be recognized by the policymakers. Now, our basic understanding of the article is that we all know that carbon dioxide levels are rising, and this is one amongst the major greenhouse gases leading to the warming up of the entire planet and leading to climate change. Now, an option has been given by this piece of editorial is, what this editorial analyzes is that this carbon dioxide can be sequestered in the soil, and this will result in mitigating climate change and also ensuring better quality of the soil. So that is the context of this particular editorial. Some analysis that have been drawn is, first and foremost, the author talks about soil carbon co-benefits. Here she brings out an analysis that in ensuring carbon levels in the soil, increased carbon levels in the soil, will have several co-benefits. These co-benefits will include improving the quality of agricultural yield, improving soil health. This will ensure food security. Also, it will ensure better quality of water, as chemicals will not be used in the farming, and this will have added benefits to improved water quality. So these co-benefits exist, and the primary benefit would be that carbon dioxide levels will be improved, will be decreased in the environment, and so climate change can be mitigated. So that is the first analysis. The second analysis is related to carbon pools. Now, several fora are acting as carbon pools. For example, the Earth's crust is acting as a carbon pool. The atmosphere is a carbon pool. Oceans are a carbon pool. Living trees are a carbon pool. Amongst so many, soil is also a promising carbon pool, is what has been advocated by the author here, and it is the largest terrestrial pool, and this should be exploited, this should be used. That is the analysis that is drawn. Now, coming to soil organic carbon sources. What are the sources for this organic content into the soil? These are the plants, the animals, the microbes, the leaves, the woods, etc., which are subject, all of these are the sources, and these are subject to some changes also over time, where through temperature, through pressure, these add to the carbon content in the soil. So that is about what all can be the sources. Now, coming to some climate change targets. We all know that as per the Paris climate deal, it has been accepted globally that an attempt is going to be made to reduce increase in temperature to 1.5 degrees C from the pre-industrial era. However, as per many experts and several studies, it has been raised that the commitments given by the countries is not sufficient to meet this target, and it is expected the temperature is going to cross the 2 degree Celsius projected. So that is one issue of concern. So the author is bringing out an analysis that to ensure that the climate change targets are met, it is of utmost importance that the government seeks this option of soil as a pool for carbon sequestration. That is one analysis. Now, how can one increase the soil organic carbon? That is being analyzed. So this can be increased by reducing soil erosion, by ensuring no tillage farming, also by using of cover crops, nutrient management, applying manure and sludge, water harvesting and conservation, and agroforestry practices. All of this will ensure that an increase in soil organic content, and this will help mitigate climate change. So that is one analysis that is drawn. Also, an analysis has been drawn with respect to the Green Revolution. Now, the Green Revolution, though, was a major advancement in the agriculture of India. It has led to increased yields, but it has had some side effects, which include greater use of pesticides, greater use of fertilizers. All of this has had an impact on the toxicity in waters. It is also impacting the health of the citizens. It has moved away, caused agriculture to move way away from organic farming. So in such a scenario, to mitigate the harmful effects of the Green Revolution and to ensure that the degradation of soil which has happened in the aftermath of the Green Revolution be reversed, it is of utmost importance that the carbon level of the soils through soil organic carbon sequestration be improved. So that is one analysis that has been drawn in the editorial. Coming to the next point is that there is a need to focus on traditional systems. Here the author has named a few traditional systems like the natural farming and permaculture. Permaculture is a kind of agricultural practice which directly uses the patterns and features of the natural ecosystem and doesn't interfere much in the natural processes of the environment. So the author here is advocating that there is a need to focus on the traditional systems rather than going blindly behind modern agricultural systems. So revival of traditional systems is something that is warranted by the author. Also, the author has advocated, this is a good point, that there is a need to link policy to farm experiments. Now, what is happening in India is that the policy is having an ivory tower approach. The ground realities is something that is not being monitored. Another thing is that farm experiments by the farmers exclusive to India is something that needs to be considered in the policy framework. This is something that is not happening at present because the farmers, the author is making a case that the farmers in India have a lot of traditional knowledge, and traditionally they were very organic in their practice, and also they focused on adding carbon levels in the soil, which is not happening now. So something, this is a de novo point that the article advocate. So this is important here. Another thing is that providing support to ensure transition. This is a good suggestion again, because if the farmer has to immediately shift towards a more organic approach which ensures adding carbon to the soil naturally, in such a scenario definitely some premature support to the farmers is warranted, and this should be given by the government. Another thing is that the author talks about a challenge to the agriculture today. This is important again. The challenge to agriculture in the present times is that with the rising population there is a pressure to produce more, but this has to be done in the backdrop of decreasing land and also with the worsening of climate. So that is the basic challenge to agriculture, that it has to increase more with decreased facilities like decreased land as well as decreased cooperation from the weather. So that is a good analysis that has been drawn in this piece of editorial. Also, an analysis has been drawn about the Parliamentary Standing Committee recommendations of 2016 in its agricultural report, where it recommended a revision of existing fertilizer subsidy policy and increasing the use of organic fertilizers. Here the author brings about a point that to implement this policy, the government needs to rise above vested interests like those of the fertilizer lobby, and it needs to promote natural farming as well as organic farming. So that is the entire analysis of this article. This article is important in the context that the government is really focusing upon the health of the soil. The soil health card scheme of the government is also one in such line. So the article is important entirely from agricultural point of view. Also, it is linking agriculture to climate change. Such kind of linkages in UPSC answers is something that is always welcome. So this article is in line with that. Also, the opinion that the author finally has given is that the ability of soils to sequester carbon is a win-win strategy for the farmers, for the people, as well as for climate change. So this is a good analysis that has been drawn in this regard. With this, we'll move on to the next article. I'm sorry. Yeah, problem of plenty. Now, the context of this article is that the cycle of boom and bust in prices of agricultural products is something that is a common happening. Now, recently, there have been cases where a large number of potatoes have been grown by these farmers, and these farmers are unable to sell their produce profitably, and as a result of which a large kilograms of these potatoes have been left by the farmers to decay and to rot. So this is a repetitive concern for the entire agricultural economy in the country. Last year, similar case was seen with red chilies, with tur dal, as well as with tomatoes. So such episodes are repetitive, and so an analysis has been drawn in that respect. Now, several issues have been raised. The first is that of a cobweb phenomenon. This is important as a keyword. What do you understand by a cobweb phenomenon? As the word itself says, it is an entrapping phenomenon. Now, what happens here is that farmers tend to increase the production of certain crops in response to their high prices during a previous season. This results in a entrapment situation because in the aftermath of increased supply due to increased cultivation of the crop, it leads to a price crash, and the farmers are not able to get adequate remuneration for their crops. So this is the cobweb phenomenon. The second issue is that of a mismatch between the demand and supply. Now, it cannot happen that potatoes are not required in the country. For example, of this particular case, the only problem is that where potatoes are being grown, there is a supply surplus, and so the demand has fallen. Whereas in other parts of the country, definitely there can be a demand. So the need is that if this demand and supply chain would not have been blocked, if this would have been a continuous chain, then it would be a win-win situation for the consumers on this side, who would have gotten potato at cheaper prices, as well as for the farmers who could have sold their crop at a higher prices. So it is a problem of demand and supply which needs to be matched and needs to be bridged. So that is an analysis that has been given in this article. The third thing is that there is a general slowdown in the rural economy, and such episodes in this backdrop is something that is most unwelcoming. Some figures have been given that as per the GDP estimates, from growth expected to as per the GDP estimates, farm growth is expected to drop from 4.9% in the year 2016-17 to 2.1% in the year 2017-18. So this is definitely a cause of concern and is an unwelcome precedent. Another thing is that of agricultural distress, which is something that is prevalent in the country, as again and again we are seeing that from state to state farmers are asking for, calling out for relief. So the general agricultural distress is something that is prevalent in the country, and this is much more accentuated by such situations because here the farmer has ample bumper crops but is unable to get a remuneration. So it is a major cause of concern there as well. Another thing is that agricultural distress definitely has a humanitarian cost, but this also results in a political cost because majority of the population of India is rural and it depends upon agriculture. So in that respect, to overcome this political costs, the politician come up with short-term political measures. This is also in view of the elections that are coming up in several states. Also 2019 will be the year of general elections in the country. So in this backdrop, often it happens that the political leaders go in for some knee-jerk reactions. This include basically only two arenas are there where political reactions take place. First is that of a loan waiver. Either politicians will announce that they will give farmers a loan waiver, or they will meddle with the MSPs. Both loan waiver as well as MSPs is an economic issue, but in India it becomes a political issue. I have mentioned it in previous various discussions also. So this is an important analysis which has been drawn by the author. Further, he says that these kind of short-term solutions is something that is unwarranted, and a permanent solution to this problem is indeed what is required. Several editorials before this also have advocated for a permanent long-term solution to the problem. One editorial even called for reforms on pace with the 1991 liberalization reforms for the industry. So those kind of permanent solution is something that is definitely warranted to ensure regular incomes and stable incomes to the farmer. Now, an issue that has been analyzed here is that of broken supply chain that is over-regulated. This is in the context of the APMC Act. Now, the Agricultural Price Marketing Committee Act is something that has been controversial for many years. This is something that is a model. Some basics regarding to the APMC Act is that a model APMC Act is something that the center makes, but agriculture is a state subject, and in this respect, every state has the right to have its own APMC Act. Only it takes some pieces of information from the model act and it may or may not implement those. Now, the recent most was the APMC Act 2003. This act has not been fully advocated by all the states. Only 16 states have adopted something from this APMC Model Act of 2003. So a new APMC Act, which is the APMC Act of 2017, a Model APMC Act is in the pipeline. So that is some background. Now, what's the problem related to APMC? The problem is that each particular state is divided into several geographical regions of different APMC of an agricultural market, and a farmer can sell his produce only in the market of which is in his region. Now what happens is that the farmer being regulated to sell his produce only to a particular market where there are few buyers. These buyers also group together and they form a cartel, which is known as cartelization by buyers. So in such a scenario, the farmer is exploited. The farmer is not able to sell his produce effectively and liberally. This is one analysis, and this is one of the major concerns related to APMC. So the author is advocating here that this broken supply chain, which is over-regulated, needs to be done away with. So definitely it is in line with the reforms in the APMC Act which has been suggested. As I told you, a new act of 2017 is in the pipeline. Another thing is that at present the agricultural markets are highly segregated. There is a need for a national market in this regard, and an e-national market has been formed also. But it has not yet fully been realized. It has not been functioning very efficiently. So there is a need to overhaul this e-national market, one common market for the agricultural buying and selling, because if there is agricultural surplus in one part of the country, it should act as a boon for the deficit part of the country rather than as a distress for the farmers itself. So that linkage is something that is what is warranted. Another thing is that of forward-looking contracts. This is another part of the suggestion. Forward-looking contracts are a contract which has been done before the sowing of the crop. For example, in this case where farmers were to plant potatoes, if the farmer would have had a contract with a buyer before sowing these potatoes, it could have been decided that, suppose the farmer A would have decided with a buyer B that he is going to sell his crop for a fixed amount of sum, then in such a scenario, even if the crop was a bumper one, this farmer would not have had to suffer losses, and it would have been a beneficial thing for the buyer as well. So this kind of forward looking contract should be advocated in agriculture. That is what has been advocated in this piece of editorial. The opinion is that there is a need to ensure income stability to the farmer rather than momentary increased incomes which happens due to knee-jerk political reactions. So that is the opinion. The article is definitely of utmost importance from general studies paper 3 point of view. Agricultural distress is a thing that is going on for long, and a question in UPSC mains is much expected on this issue. So coming to the next article, tackling government litigation. Now, the topic is an important one, though the editorial has fewer points which are of relevance. So those I shall be limiting my discussion to only those points. Now, the opinion is that the answer lies in finding solutions unique to each litigation-prone department. The context of the article is that the government is the biggest litigant in India. A figure has been given by the author, which has been given by the Ministry of Law, which says that in 46% of the court cases, it is the government that is the litigant. Now, litigant simply means that a party to a suit, a court case. That is what is the meaning of litigant. That means the government is a party to the court 46% of court cases. So this is what is the context. Definitely this is a cause of worry, both one for the judiciary as well as for the executive. In the context of the judiciary, it is important is that it burdens the judiciary. Even time and again, whenever questions have been raised on the judiciary and why the judiciary is so overburdened, judiciary has placed the blame on the executive, and it has said that the judiciary is overburdened because the executive is continuously filing cases or is a participant, as a litigant in the cases of judiciary. So that is one issue. Another thing is that it burdens the executive also. If the executive is going to be involved in so many litigations, then it hampers the effective governance by the executive. So that is one analysis that has been drawn. Now, coming to the issues raised in the editorial, first is that of definition of the government. Here the author brings about an analysis where she says that the term government is not something that is a restricted one. Rather, under Article 12, the term government is a wide one. It includes a number of institutions. Even nationalized banks are a part of the government. Government universities are a part of the government. So in such a scenario, it needs to be taken as a huge ambit of institutions rather than specifically one institution. So if you analyze from that perspective, then this burden does not appear too large, as the government itself is a huge institution. So that is one analysis that the author has drawn. The second thing is that the author brings about an analysis where she says that focus should be on the respondent side. Here the author gives an example of the Karnataka High Court, where she says that as per a study of the Karnataka High Court, there were only approximately 7% of the cases where the government had filed the complaint, and in majority of the cases the government is merely a respondent to these complaints. So it would be wrong to say that the government is highly engrossed in government litigation and the matter needs to be seen more objectively. So that is one analysis that the author has brought about. Now, coming to some suggestions, this is the important part of the editorial, is the suggestion that the author has advocated to do away with this problem. First is that she suggests that there is a need for a robust internal dispute resolution mechanism, especially a decentralized dispute resolution mechanism which needs to be there in every single department. So that is something that the author has advocated. Another thing that the author has advocated is for quasi-judicial authorities. Not only there should be an increase in quasi-judicial authorities, it is also important that there should be judicially trained cadres in these judicially quasi-judicial authorities to ensure legitimacy of these. Despite the fact that several tribunals do exist, the faith of the people in these tribunals is something that is eroding. So to restore that faith, it is needed that judicially trained people are manning these authorities. So that is one analysis that has been given. Another thing is that the author is advocating for greater data research and analysis in this regard. Like above, the author has broken two myths that why it shouldn't be prima facie taken for granted that government is involved in a lot of litigation. So greater data is required in this regard, greater research and analysis on this issue is required. So that is one opinion that the author has given. Another thing is that a new cadre of judicial officers is something that is needed to ensure internal dispute resolution mechanism and an alternate dispute redressal mechanism. This has time and again been advocated, and definitely it has been reiterated by the author here. This is an important solution. Another thing is that there is a need to relook at litigation-prone departments with solutions unique to each. This will ensure that lesser litigation happens if there is redressal mechanisms within a particular department itself. So that is one solution that the author has given. Now, as I mentioned, the topic of government litigation is something that is important. It is important from the context of basically judiciary more so than from the executive point of view. But the important part in the editorial is the suggestions that has been given. So that's the importance of this particular article. Coming to the next article, restoring order in the court. Now, with regards to this article had been taken much in detail. I had discussed this article on the 13th of January discussion. So I would suggest that all of you please watch that video for discussion on this, as there is no new point in this editorial which has not been discussed in that particular editorial. Also, that has much more analysis and much more aspects of this particular article. So I'm particularly mentioning it here because this topic is very important. This is in regard to the recent press conference held by 4 judges against the Chief Justice of India. So definitely it is very, very important from GS paper 2 point of view, and I would suggest that you watch this video. So with this, we come to an end. But before that, some information. We are starting a UPSC prelims cum mains classes from the 21st of January. We shall be covering all basics NCRT, which will include the NCRT daily newspaper, prelims test series and mains answer writing. So all interested candidates, please do get in touch with us. These are our contact details and this is our phone number. With this, I finish today's discussion. I thank you all for watching and I hope to see you tomorrow. Thank you.